Dive into the world of innovation with us as we unravel the challenges, breakthroughs, and latest trends that are shaping our digital landscape. This is Tech Unmuted, your guide to the tech revolution.
Welcome to another episode of Tech Unmuted, and today we're going to tackle a pretty critical topic that's affecting, honestly, just about every business. And we're talking about replacing traditional copper phone lines, or what's also known as POTS, P-O-T-S, which stands for plain old telephone service. Okay, I'm old enough to have grown up with plain old telephone service when I was a kid. With copper networks like rapidly becoming a thing of the past, what's happening is organizations now are being forced to have to make a really quick decision. That is, do I stick with, like outdated technology that's costly and hard to upgrade, or do I look for a reliable alternative? That's what this episode's about. And we're going to dive in and begin by looking at the big picture, right? So why are copper networks being phased out in the first place? Right? We got to understand that before we can understand the rest. Let's talk about that. And the reality is that copper lines, which have been the backbone, honestly, of telecommunications for, for decades, they're no longer a viable option. They're not a viable option for the future. That infrastructure is aging significantly. It is expensive to maintain, and simply put, it's not equipped to handle the demands of modern communications. And telecom providers are following suit. They're focusing really hard on advanced technologies. And so what's that mean? That means that POTS is going away. And businesses that are still relying on POTS, well, they face a number of risks from, increasing in service outages as these as these central offices, which are data centers, as they start to be decommissioned. Okay, you may have service interruptions. Also, the price of POTS is simply skyrocketing, and maintenance costs have also gone up. In fact, I have a note here. I wanted to write it down so I wouldn't get it wrong. So, in the decade between 2009, okay, and 2019, POTS, in other words, plain old telephone service, the cost in the U.S. increased by 16.3%. So that's, again, within 2009, 2010, a 10-year period, there was an increase of 16.3%. However, just in 5 years, between 2019 and 2024, the annual price increase nearly doubled to 31.4%, and it is not slowing down. It's simply skyrocketing. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, why does this matter to my business? Well, relying on outdated infrastructure, as you can imagine, it's going to lead to major disruptions. Okay, and let's be honest, no business can afford that. I don't care if you're small, medium, or large business. Disruptions to your business are just not good. Nobody wants them. So why even have to deal with it, right? Why even allow that to happen? So Fusion Connect has been helping companies transition away from POTS now for quite a few years. And it's pretty cool what they have been able to do. And I'm going to walk you a little bit through that journey, just so you understand it. So what's the alternative to plain old telephone service? Okay. Well, we have modern alternatives. And the way I think about this, when I think of POTS personally, I think about them in use case scenarios. Like, what is the use case? So, for example, okay, so maybe there is an employee, a human being, right, sitting behind an analog phone, an old analog phone that requires plain old telephone service. Listen, I know a few small businesses around me that still have that old push button analog phone on their desk. In their mind, if it ain't broken, why am I going to fix it? But their bills are going up significantly, so they're going to be forced to make a decision anyway. But in that case, in the case of, hey, I have a person sitting on an analog phone, what are my alternatives? Well, you have two in my mind. One, you can move to a modern hosted telephone service, right? Like voice or IP. Basically, full-featured, cloud-based phone service delivered over your internet connection. You'll probably get a new phone with that. That's IP-enabled. So that's one option. The other option is what Fusion Connect calls the digital business line. The digital business line. What is it? It's basically a device called an ATA, an analog telephone adapter. So to get a little technical, what it does, it takes an analog signal, converts that signal to SIP. SIP is very common, right? It's a common voice over IP protocol or language, and so it does that. And then when the data comes in reverse, it comes from the SIP side, it translates the SIP to analog, and so that's what it does. So analog telephone adapter, an ATA, and we can connect this with a SIP connection in the back end, and you can keep your phone. You can keep your phone, your analog phone, and you'll be able to make and receive phone calls. There won't be any changes to your hardware. Everything will work the same, but you won't be paying those crazy prices for traditional pod service. So that's one use case, and you have a couple of options there, right? Another use case that comes to mind, and I think of this as anything that's an analog endpoint device, minus the phone we just talked about or a fax machine. I like to treat those phones and fax machines separate. So an analog endpoint device. I don't know. I'll give you some example. Maybe an older point of sale system. Maybe it's a vending machine. Maybe it's an ATM machine. Maybe it's a gate entry system. Maybe it's a paging system. I don't know, right? So just call those analog endpoint devices. For those devices, we can use the same digital business line, right, that Fusion Connect offers, which is that ATA. And it'll convert those signals, and you can replace that older, aging, obsolete copper technology, okay? Where it gets a little tricky is when you have analog devices for, you ready for this? Elevators, fire alarms, maybe security systems, right? The ones that are really regulated here are the fire-related ones. So, like the phone inside of the elevator, the fire alarm, right? So for those scenarios, there is modern solutions. I know that in the past, those traditional phone lines were critical because some of you may not know this, but what powered that line, that copper line, that power came from the central office. It didn't come from the building that the copper line is terminating to. So, for example, you can be in a building and the power goes out and nothing else might work, but that copper line will work because the power for that copper line comes from the data center known as the central office. And then that phone that's in the elevator will still make and receive calls regardless of the building going dark, right? So yeah, I mean, POTS lines were great for that because they had their own independent power source. It didn't matter what was the power situation with the specific building or elevator that you were in. But there is a modern solution for that. Now, at the end of the day, it's still an ATA, right? It's still some type of device that is able to take an analog signal and convert it to a SIP signal. But this one in particular has a built-in So it's a built-in. It's one device, and it's with a built-in 8-hour plus, means it can do more than 8 hours, UPS, or universal power supply. So it's a built-in battery that gives you more than 8 hours of power. And that is what is needed or required to meet what's known as NFPA 72 standards, which are the fire standards nationwide for this type of thing. So this is great for those elevator lines, for the fire alarm lines, and of course, they're just as good for security alarms as well. And what's nice about this solution too is that although it's not required, it does have an optional redundant wireless broadband connection, which is pretty cool. So yes, we'll bring in an actual physical, SIP connection to this device. But if you wanted to have additional redundancies, it could fail over to this, wireless broadband using the cellular network. So which is pretty cool. So that's that third use case. And then the last use case I think about is fax machines. Remember I told you I want to separate, the old analog phone and the faxes, because the use case is a little different. When it comes to that fax machine, Fusion Connect actually has a couple of approaches to replacing those copper lines. One is, again, digital business line, yes. Just like we've mentioned a couple times already. You guys get that one, right? It's an ATA, it can convert the signal and you're good to go. But there's also a web-based, paperless, online fax service that Fusion Connect offers called Fusion Fax. And basically, think of it as a physical fax machine, right? What happens today in an office, right? Everybody shares a fax number. And so a fax comes in, everybody walks, and then there's maybe a little, like a sorting shelf where you can put in, hey, this is for such and such, and this one's for such and such, and eventually they'll come by and get their fax, right? It's similar to that system, but it's basically online. It's one big mailbox, right? And there's usually a person who's like the fax admin, and they'll see, oh, this fax is for Joe, so they put it into Joe's inbox, and this one's for Jane, so they move it into Jane's inbox. And through their online portal, Joe and Jane and whoever else has a fax can literally receive that fax. It comes in as a PDF. And if you have a file or PDF on your computer that you need to fax to somebody, you can just upload that to the online fax. So it's pretty cool. So those are the use cases. Now, all these things I mentioned, you want to look into for three reasons, really. One, cost savings. That's the most obvious, right? We're talking about an over 31% increase in plain old telephone service price increases in just 5 years alone. And it's still, I've heard, recently I was doing some research. I was trying to actually put together kind of like an ROI calculator, if you would, just trying to understand what's the average POTS price. I had some folks from our field, our sales field folks, tell me that they have seen plain old telephone service lines as high as $800 a month. I'm like, you have to be kidding me. In fact, when I looked at all the different prices that we saw over a period of time, they were averaging around $500, roughly $500 to $600 per month for a phone line. So definitely these new modern solutions are going to give you cost savings. Let's just start with that one. That's the big elephant in the room. But a couple things in addition to the cost savings that you get is you get flexibility. Because listen, if you move to that hosted voice solution, Fusion Connect has pretty interesting offerings. They have like a traditional business VoIP offering where you have an IP phone and it's all hosted. But they also can do stuff with Microsoft Teams or WebEx where you can actually make and receive phone calls within WebEx and Teams. And that is really cool because now you have flexibility. You can have your employees take these business calls from anywhere. And so if you have a remote workforce or a hybrid workforce, this is a good way to go. And then finally, of course, reliability. Listen, the system is solid. Our SIP trunking infrastructure has literally a 100% uptime guarantee. And we actually have stats to stand behind that, which is pretty impressive. So it's solid. It integrates with your existing IT infrastructure. You also get enhanced features that you normally wouldn't get, like voice analytics and call routing. And it's just going to be a much smoother and much efficient operation to begin with. So cost savings, flexibility, reliability. Those are all the reasons why you want to look at some of the things I mentioned above that Fusion Connect can offer you. Now, I know what the fear is. The fear is, man, that means I have to change. I have to make a change, which could mean downtime. And I get that fear. Trust me, that is a legitimate concern for any business. I'll tell you, Fusion Connect's approach is pretty cool because they have a project management / provisioning team, and they work in conjunction with your team to mitigate that downtime. They work hand in hand. We're very good at this. Like, we've done this for a long time, and we know how to mitigate downtime and disruption. So I would say don't worry. Our team will kind of guide you through the process. Another concern is the cost of equipment upgrades. And yes, I get that. Folks are like, yeah, I have this old phone. Why do I need to all of a sudden update it and all of a sudden incur cost? Well, first of all, if you were to buy one of these phones, these new IP-enabled phones, they're not that expensive. They're less than a couple $100, but we also bake it in so that it's an operational cost for you. And so basically, it's built into your operational cost versus your CapEx. So if you don't have the CapEx, you'll just pay it in your monthly charge over time. And so I wouldn't be too concerned about that because there's ways that we can bake that cost into your solution. And finally, training. A lot of folks fear change because they think about, well, how we're going to get everybody up to speed on the new technology. And I'll tell you again, if there's one thing we do very well on the onboarding process, bringing a new customer on board, especially when it comes to this stuff here, Fusion Connect has a really good onboarding training program. Like, you will be blown away by how good it is. I promise you. We've actually gotten very good feedback on that training. So I get it, right? Concerns with downtime, incurred costs of hardware, and training, or lack of knowledge, right? We will take care of that, right? That's our promise to you. So listen. Bottom line is this, right? These traditional copper lines, they're phasing out. That's it. There's no stopping that train. They've been phasing out for a while, and they're going to finish phasing out. So the question is, right, what decision are you going to make? Are you going to try to hold on to an aging, dying platform? Or are you going to look at making a switch to a more modern solution? Okay. And if you need help with a little bit more information to make that decision, there's a really good blog that we have on our website. So if you go to fusionconnect.com and you search our blogs, we have a blog called POTS Lines Replacement. It's time. It's time. So POTS Line Replacement, it's time. That's the name of the blog. You need to find that blog, read it. We will include a link to that blog in the description below, but it will help you kind of make an informed decision even further. So at the end of the day, you need to be thinking about taking your business communications to the next level, especially if you have things like elevators and fire alarms and stuff of that nature. And you need to start looking for a company and a solution that is reliable, that is cost effective, and that is proven. And so for more information, you're going to want to go to fusionconnects.com website and search under solutions. You'll see where it says POTS replacement, and they'll walk you through the whole process on how to go about kind of revamping these old analog copper lines. So with that said, that brings this episode to an end. Again, do not forget to go to our website, download that blog that I just mentioned. We'll include a link in the description. And until next time, stay curious, stay connected.
Thanks for diving into the tech world with us today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to never miss an episode of Tech Unmuted. Stay curious, stay connected.